Greetings, folks, and welcome to another edition of the Pilot Review Show. I'm Captain Blade J52, and I'm joined this week by the Wolf of Clan Timber.
What's up, guys?
Who apparently has a head cold from his plane travels and so on, so if he sounds a bit like Barry White, think nothing of it.
Just saying, it's a good voice.
I don't think anybody's going to argue with you there, but... Anyways, our resident RP hologram has other obligations, so he won't be joining us this evening. But not too terribly much going on this week and everything. I know we didn't have a show last week, and I was a little behind at getting some stuff fixed. And let me turn my mic down just a hair. Still in Discord settings, so think nothing of that, folks. But anyways, getting into our show this evening, like I say, I know I was a little late on getting some previous episodes uploaded. I do apologize for that. Had some stuff going on, couldn't really get them uploaded as fast as I wanted to, but we're going to be back on our regular schedule as of this particular episode. But a few little things we do have going on. We wanted to go back and touch base on the patch notes from last week. Like I said, we know there wasn't really a lot going on as far as significant articles, but there are some changes we did want to touch base on in those patch notes, so let's go ahead and get started. Now, this was our patch notes for the 4th. This had our first contact day event. This is what got us our replica Thompson submachine gun, which thankfully was account-wide, in case anybody who had been curious about that. But the big patch note that I did want to touch base on involves some of the changes to how some of the consoles worked, as well as our space combat pets. Now, it reduced the shared cooldown on all combat space pets and distress call devices from 5 minutes to 2 minutes. And then the other big one, removed equip restrictions on the following universal consoles to be usable on all starships, which is the ablative hazard shielding for Feds and KDF versions, dynamic power or dynamic defense deployment system, variable auto targeting armament, and then for warbirds, there was the ablative hazard shielding, the Romulan version, the shield absorptive frequency generator, and the ionized particle beam. So that's a couple of the very big changes that we had here. But, Timber Sir, what's, out of these particular patch notes, what was some of your thoughts on that, and them removing the restrictions on those consoles?
Well, I mean, it makes those consoles a bit more versatile. Ablative hazard shielding was a very nice survival console that was locked into one specific type of starship for all 3 factions. So the fact that a particular console is now, free to be used on anything is a rather nice boost for survival for a lot of people, especially who spent in for that ship, because that particular starship that it came from is the same one that gives you emergency weapon cycle. So now you're getting a great starship trait off that ship, plus the console that was locked into that ship specifically can be placed anywhere. So now there's 2 reasons really to buy that ship that are not locked into just that ship. The other couple of things that just kind of stood out to me were that they resolved an issue causing some of the buffs from reroute reserves to weapons or exceed rated limits to affect other weapon firing modes. So that's a good thing. They're not really affecting anything that they're not supposed to. And then the interesting thing that I don't think most of us noticed, but they fixed it, that the Nukara crystalline shield, its refraction buff that's been there since forever, it can now reflect proton damage. Now, not many people use proton damage, but the ones that do, you couldn't reflect it before. Apparently now you can. So those were 2 of the biggest ones that stood out to me. One thing that I'm looking at right now, I don't really use a cloak, but it says that cloaking devices now indicate the duration their ambush bonus will last in the tooltip. So apparently it did not actually specify the exact amount of time. Now it does. That's definitely helpful in calculating just how long you have it when you decloak.
Okay. There's definitely some good stuff that we had out of this particular stuff, and I had actually forgotten about the proton damage, so I'm glad that you mentioned that. Because, like I say, there's not too many, like you were saying, sources of proton damage in the game, but there are enough of them there that I'm glad that they added this. And I do hope that they flesh out proton damage in the future, because that was a interesting type of damage, I guess. But moving right along, we actually have our Tholian web for the Infinity box. Now, basically, in a nutshell, they added the Tier 6 Recluse and to the Infinity box, and added the Orb Weaver to the Low-Buy store. I could not for the life of me think of the wording. Now, the good thing about this is that these are leveling starships, meaning they will scale with you, and as soon as you leave the tutorial, you can pick them up and start using them from there. So you could have a Recluse day one if you're somebody that maybe you're looking for a Tholian themed tune, or that's just what you enjoy. This is the Tholian Jorgmu carrier. I probably butchered that name, I'm well aware of that, but as far as some of the basic stats, we can touch base really quickly. The hull strength is 1.45, shield modifier 1.375, it's a 3-3 weapons layout, 4 device slots. You have a Commander Universal / Miracle Worker seat, Lieutenant Tactical, Lieutenant Commander Engineering, Lieutenant Commander Science, and Ensign Universal. Then for your console modifications, you have 3 Tactical, 4 Engineering, 4 Science, and 1 Universal console, which comes standard with any Miracle Worker ship. It's a 5.5 base turn. Then you get, for your subsystem targeting, you get, tongue-tied. In addition to subsystem targeting, you get a +5 bonus power to weapons, shields, and then for your engines and aux, you get a +10 to each, which is actually a fairly significant chunk of bonus power. It can load dual cannons, comes with the Miracle Worker Innovation ship mechanics, and then you get an enhanced version of the Tholian Tetrion grid that we had previously. You also get the Carrier Mastery package, which gives you Hangar Pet recharge time, maximum hull HP, shield regen and hardness, and maximum shield HP, and then you get the Precision Multi-Targeting Starship trait. Then, it says while this trait is active, activating any subsystem targeting ability will additionally grant you a fire at will 1, as well as giving you a massive accuracy rating buff. Now, for those people that didn't know what the previous version of the console did, really quickly, it'll, whenever you activate it, it creates a Tetrion energy between you and your Hangar Pets and nearby allies, increasing the amount of outgoing weapon damage for a short duration, and the Hangar Pets will additionally reflect Tetrion beam attacks at nearby foes. So, that's that particular ship. Then touch base on the Orb Weaver stats really quickly, then we'll get thoughts from our Resident Wolf. For our Orb Weaver, it's a shield modifier of 1.5, hull strength 1.05, it's also a 3-3, it's 3 device slots, an Ensign Tactical, a Lieutenant Commander Engineering / Miracle Worker, a Commander Science, Lieutenant Science / Command, and a Lieutenant Commander Universal. You get 3 Tactical, 3 Engineering, 5 Science consoles, base turn of 10. For your bonus power, you get a +5 to engines and a +15 to aux. You get the Enhanced Tholian Web, which pops up the Tholian Web like the previous version did. You also get the sensor analysis, subsystem targeting, a secondary deflector, and the Starship ability package of Science Vessel. I see a little copy and paste error there. And then you get the improved Photonic Officer Starship trait. While it's slotted, the duration of Photonic Officer is increased, and in addition, while it's active, you'll get a significant boost to your exotic damage and outgoing healing. I know I have some thoughts on these particular ships, good sir, but let's hear from you.
Well, quite honestly, I've already got both on Tribble. One thing that was funny was these ships released on Tribble the day before they released on Holodeck, and we're not sure if they meant to do that on purpose or not. But I've been messing with the Orb Weaver since the Wednesday of its release. The Orb Weaver is actually rather nice. It's actually made me want to build a science. There hasn't been a science vessel that's come out that's made me actually actively want to build a science vessel. This one was the first, and I gotta say it's because the console's been enhanced with decent passives, and the console for the Orb Weaver, broadcasts that web where you can basically wrap a web around your target, and they can shoot away the nodes to eventually get out of it, but they can take damage if they hit the web. It basically keeps them still, more or less, where they can't get to you, they can't fire at you, but you can fire at them. So the console added passively 10% outgoing hull healing and 21.4 control expertise. It's actually a pretty decent console now as a passive, but the Orb Weaver's trait is absolutely phenomenal. And I've got it right here because I'm using it in the Orb Weaver test that we're going to record later. So you're basically getting an extra 10 seconds out of Photonic Officer. Right now it lasts for 20 seconds, so with this one it's 30 seconds. But pretty much for the duration of Photonic Officer, when it's activated, 25% Category 2 hull healing, shield healing, and exotic damage. All Cat 2 bonuses for 30 seconds. That is actually a rather large chunk of healing and exotic damage for your Gravity Well, your DRBs, Subspace Vortexes, all the exotic powers that you've got. A huge chunk of damage. And honestly, to me, at least with how I'm building science, and how it's made me actually want to build a science-based vessel, it makes you want to have Photonic Officer in your build somehow, because this is a hefty chunk of boost from a trait. And on top of that, with the way they built Photonic Officer, it's cooldown reduction. They've rebuilt it where it's every second now you get a little bit of cooldown over time. So that whole mix is rather nice. And I'm trying out, putting my build on the T6 Recluse, and with the fact that it's got a universal console slot, you can have this thing have 5 engineering slots, 5 science slots, or you can have 4 of each console slot. 4 tactical, 4 science, 4 engineering. You can just have this get it out however you want it, and it's going to be not just a decent science vessel. Some people use it because of the actual console that comes with it, the enhanced Tholian Tetryon grid, which is giving you aux power and hull cap now as a passive. But besides having that for damage boost and team damage boost, the way this thing is built at T6, you can make it into a type of DPS science vessel if you wanted to, where you could get a hell of a lot of power for your weapons. You can make it into a super science cruiser, or carrier, I should say. But then they included Miracle Worker powers on this thing, and that is a huge chunk of damage boosting there, or healing. And there's a lot of options with this thing. So honestly, if you're used to flying Tholian ships anyway, you're getting definable boosts when you get these T6 variants. And if you're not used to using them, now, if anything, now would be the time to try them out, because you're getting a lot more out of them than what you used to. It was honestly a surprise for the T6 Recluse to become a Miracle Worker ship and get the extra console slot, the innovation mechanics, all that. So now would be a time to try it out, if anything.
know for me personally, one of the carriers I did experiment early on with was actually a Recluse, and that's still sitting on my main Toon Cruzan today, the Tier 5 version. And I'm glad they finally got around to making these into Tier 6s, because they are really good ships. Even the Tier 5 variants were really good ships. Really fun to fly around and play with. And if you're looking for Tholian-themed, I guess, tunes, or like a Tholian-themed whatever, then these were great choices to have, even at the Tier 5 version. Now that we've got them in the Tier 6, like I say, I'm glad that the carrier got Miracle Worker. I'm actually surprised that it got Miracle Worker, to be honest with you. But, like you're saying, being able to have those 4 of each console type, if that's the route you wanted to go with it, and you didn't want to, say, have 5 engineering or, say, 5 science, then if you just wanted to do a balanced approach, that's great. If you want to specialize more towards, I guess, the engineering or the science, you can do that too. There's definitely a lot of flexibility with this, and always made it a really nasty carrier to play with. And plus, it can boost its allies through the console, which is one thing we've seen a lot of people doing, and overall just a really great ship I'm glad to see made into a Tier 6 finally. For the Orb Weaver, I kind of have to agree with you. This is one thing that is making me want to do more specialized science builds. And I'm not much of a science guy. That's not typically my realm that I delve into, and I'm sure you'd vouch for that. Some of our other friends would vouch for that. I'm not really much of a science player. Not that science is bad, it's just it's not usually my cup of tea. But for a ship like this, it's got a lot of good powers to play with. The fact that I could use some Miracle Worker powers and a couple of command powers, I mean, that's definitely a bonus, that's definitely a plus. And having that Photonic Officer for cooldown reduction, if I wanted to go that route, everything, not bad. So I'd have to say I'm definitely pleased with how these ships turned out. So it's definitely going to be something interesting once you get to test them out a bit more. But moving along, we have our patch notes for the 11th. I know it says 10/11/19. That's actually a typo. That's supposed to be 4/11/19. Yes, they're aware of it. Now, the big elephant in the room with this one, unfortunately, that was the day that the Foundry was finally deactivated and whatnot. It's also when people received their patches, if they participated in Foundry missions, their Botany Bays, if they created a Foundry mission, or their Genesis torpedo device, if they actually had a Spotlit mission. I was lucky enough to actually get the patch and the Botany Bay. I think Timber also got a Botany Bay.
Yeah, I realized I'd done a very tiny test map messing with a Foundry like 3 years ago. Totally forgot about it, and then I looked it up the day before it locked down. I was like, wait a minute, I created this? Next thing you know, I had a Botany Bay. So even if you tinkered in the Foundry, it looks like years ago, where you might have made just a box map, and that's reference to old Call of Duty World at War, when they released the modding tools for zombie maps. You just make one box rooms for the map. If that's all you did in Foundry, you still created and published a map. It counts towards a Botany Bay, even if it wasn't that great. You got one. I'd totally forgotten I even made one. But I'm glad that everybody got those. I'm glad that people got their Foundry spotlights where they could get those Genesis devices. Honestly, I haven't seen anyone let one go as far as like put it in a social zone and actually let everybody see it yet. But before we go into any other patch notes, I am deeply saddened by the fact that we lost the Foundry. That was one of the greatest things that we had. It was a very sad day.
Yep. No, there's quite a few people that did some Remembering the Foundry series. I know I've got some recordings to release later on. I know you've got some recordings to release and everything. There's quite a few people that I guarantee went back through, recorded their favorite Foundry missions for, I guess, posterity at this point, as a way to remember it. And like I say, I'm hopeful they're going to do a 2.0 version sometime down the road, because, like I said, it made no sense to me as to why they would save all of that, you know, as a business, why they would potentially pay to save all that data, back all that data up, and everything, if they're never going to do something with it. But, like I say, it's kind of a bit of a side tangent and everything, but, yeah. That was one thing that did suck about this last bit of patch notes. But we also have our Infinity lockboxes returned for a time, and they're actually doing something a bit different this go around that I've not actually seen them do with previous incarnations of the box. And essentially, one of the things they're doing is they're giving a bundle of 20 of each box of our current Emperor's box, and also the Infinity box that you can claim for free out of the C store. Now, I don't know if it's a bug, I don't know if it's intended, but it has crashed the prices on the Infinity boxes, since people can just go in and claim them for free. You still need a key to open the box, of course, but I know I've stocked up on some extra boxes. I think you stocked up on some extra boxes. So, yeah, you can go in there. It's under the... I found it in the New Items tab. At the moment is where I'm seeing them. But, it says they removed the T5 Orb Weaver from the Tier 5 ship package and the Tholian Recluse from the low-buy store. They added the Orb Weaver to the low-buy store and added the Carrier to the Tier 6 pack itself. And we now have items from the Swarm box that have been included in the Infinity pack. These ships are also, of course, as we discussed a minute ago, leveling ships. They've also reorganized some bits of the C store, everything. They've removed the clear primary mission. New missions that you pick up will now always become primary. One big change that I did see that I like is there's actually a couple of changes. Buying single ships that are part of the mega bundles no longer block players from buying the mega bundle the ships are part of. That is a very big thing. So if you bought, as an example, a Dyson ship, a Dyson Science Destroyer, it now will not lock you out of the entire bundle. Then the other big one that they did was, see, I just saw it a second ago, the mission journal update. So if you get to level 65 on any one of your characters, all of your other characters on your account should now be able to start any mission group they want, and you can start the first mission in any section of the journal. So this applies to 23rd century captains after they've reached the 25th century, and to Jem'Hadar and Romulans after they have chosen an allegiance. And then the 25th century, the standard Starfleet and standard Klingon captains get this immediately after the tutorial. So, I know there's been some pretty good stuff. Another thing that they did do, added a cross-faction bundle, Mirror Crossfield Science Destroyer equipment, to the low-buy ships and crew store, and the agonized subatomic disintegrator to the low-buy spaceship store for Klingon-aligned players to purchase. So, some interesting stuff in the rest of this. What's some of your thoughts, good sir?
Quite honestly, the number one thing is something you already touched on, and that is the fact that you can break a pack initially if you want to, and still buy the pack later. That was actually a really good thing. Initially, I think we saw this with Age of Discovery bundle, and then they were doing it. They had the starter pack initially, but then they had it as part of the Discovery Operations pack. And people were worried that since they'd already bought the starter pack initially, they couldn't buy the larger one. And what it did instead was a discount. Now, I don't know if it gives you a discount for what they just patched in. It would be nice if it did. But at the very least, you can break a pack early, and then if you want to buy the rest of it later, you can. I'm just hoping that, let's say, and I'll look at the C store. Let's say it's one of the 9 pilot ships. They had that Andorian pilot ship mega bundle where you get all 9 of them, all 3 Romulan, KDF, and Fed. And you buy one of them because of a trait. Let's say it's for Promise of Ferocity or Improved Gravity Well, for Fed side. It used to be if you bought one of them, you couldn't buy the whole mega bundle anymore. Now you can, and what I'm hoping is if you bought 1 or 2 of these previously already, you get a discount towards that bundle price, like we saw with the Age of Discovery starter pack versus the Operations pack that came out months later. That's one thing I can hope for.
Okay. But, like I say, not too terribly much going on this week in terms of notes, in terms of major events, at least just yet. You know, we're hoping in the coming little bit we'll see more information about some of the upcoming stuff. I know some people are wanting to see more information about those coupons they were talking about in the live streams, as well as people are looking forward to some of the last of the Tier 6 ships being created. So I know one of the big things that was stated was every ship will eventually have a Tier 6. So that would mean eventually we're going to finally see a Tier 6 Nova. We're going to see Tier 6 Oberth as some prime examples, perhaps. So we'll see how that goes, I suppose. But that's what we have for our articles this evening. Like we're saying, not a lot of stuff really going on, but there were a few very key points that we wanted to touch base on for you guys, and to see how that's going to go. Now, for this particular evening, if I could buttons worth a crap today. Now, this particular budget build is actually a request from a friend and viewer of ours who wanted to see a budget build for the Xiphus Escort. Now, this was given out as one of the summer event ships a few years back for participating in the Risa summer event. This is it's classified as a heavy escort. This was, I believe, the first of the Vorgon ships that we ever had. It went to this one, then I think it went to the carrier, and then it went to the one that had the weird 3-5 layout. I can't remember the names off the top of my head. Words. I can't speak today, apparently, folks. But, anyway, getting back into it now. So I couldn't remember the names of all the other ships off the top of my head. But anyway, as far as our weapons layout for the ship, it's a 4-3 layout. I believe this one also got a... didn't this one also get a heavy weapon slot, if I'm not mistaken?
I believe so.
So I don't think this... Yep, it doesn't show up on the builder here, so I believe this one does get a heavy weapon slot. I'm sure folks will correct us in the comments if that's not the case. Now, we went with a Tetrion layout because this was requested by the user, and he wanted to see, okay, what could I do on a budget with Tetrions? What's some of the stuff that I could come up with? Now, one thing I did throw in the notes, the forward weapons are actually supposed to be resonating dual banks. I made them into arrays for the purpose of the builder, because the builder, for whatever reason, does not have the dual banks in here, or I couldn't find them, one of the two. So I made that in the notes. That's actually supposed to be dual banks, just as a heads up. Then, for the rear weapons, we have a crafted omnidirectional beam. We have the anti-chronoton omni beam from Butterfly, and then we have the heavy biomolecular Tetrion turret from the Tier 6 8472 rep. As far as our shields, deflector engines, and warp core, we went with 3 pieces of the preeminent set in this instance, and then we went with the temporal phase overcharged core as our warp core. Now, the preeminent set does come with a warp core that you can get. However, we wanted to go with a 3-piece on this for some of the set bonuses we could tap into. Now, I know that we feature the temporal phase overcharged core a lot here on the show, mainly for its capacitor, but in this case we're actually calling upon the 3-set bonus that we can utilize from having the Omni and the temporal disentanglement suite on there with it. We'll touch base on that set bonus in just a moment. But the strength to the temporal phase overcharged core itself is in the form of the capacitor that it gives. It's going to basically cut your bridge officer cooldowns in half for the duration it's active, and it's basically a budget version of a temporal negotiator style effect. Then for your shields, the biggest thing about the preeminent shields is they have more energy in the back and in the sides than they actually do in the front shield facing. So it borrows a bit from Zenkethi technology, and on an escort like this that's zipping back and forth, that's actually going to be pretty good that it has extra shielding on the sides and the back. But that's what we've got for those things. Now, you do have 2 device slots on here. We like to think of them as personal preference usually. However, there are a few devices we like to recommend. One of our favorites is the Subspace Field Modulator from the Skirmish mission. It's now in the Available tab in your mission journal. It's not part of the main missions anymore, but essentially what this device will do is it gives a free neutronium alloy equivalent worth of resistances while it's active. It does, however, debuff you for a minus 400 protonic damage resistance, so that is something to be aware of. Not a lot of enemies use protonic damage, but it's something to keep an eye out for. And it also gives you 15% defense rating, I believe, is the other stat that it gave. So, very nice device. Some other choices could be energy amplifiers, Gevinite hardpoints. There's quite a few devices you could pick from. Now, as far as our consoles go, it's a 4 engineering, 2 science, 5 tactical layout. Your tactical consoles we picked up from the Midnight mission. These are your standard Tetrion phase generators. There are Category 1 buff to our Tetrions. Now, here we have the ablative hazard shielding, because the player did mention he had access to the Arbiter. And as such, we chose to utilize the console from the ship in this instance. This is going to give some nice defensive value to the ship. Apparently I don't have it on me, but essentially it's going to give a nice heal and bit of a secondary shield for the time it's active. Now we also have our harasser probes, which is the console that comes with the ship. It launches little probes that go after enemies and can wreak havoc on their systems. Now the good thing about this is it does provide a 25% Category 1 Tetrion boost, and it also gives 8% critical severity just by having it on the ship. So at the very least, it is worth it for the passive bonuses that it's going to give you. The next thing you have is the assimilated module. This is going to give a nice little bit of critical chance and severity, as well as a minor bit of control expertise while having it on the ship. And then finally we have our hydrodynamics compensator, if I could words today. Now, the hydrodynamics compensator in and of itself, in my opinion, isn't the most terribly impressive console ever, but it does round out our 2-piece bonus with our Tetrion turret, and we'll explain why that's significant momentarily. For our science consoles, we have our temporal disentanglement suite. This is going to give a nice chunk of critical chance and severity based on our aux power. It's also going to give a nice boost to our shield capacity, and it's also going to give us a bit of shield resistance. meaning our shields are going to be harder to take down. So it's an overall great console that buffs gives some pretty significant buffs, and it also rounds out our 3-piece with the Omni Beam and the Warp Core in this case. And the next thing we have, which is our final console, and it's one of our money consoles of the evening, and that is our Sticky Web console. Now, if you've ever gone into some missions and you see what looks like a stop sign that people poof up in the form of a Tholian web, that's most likely the Sticky Web console. Now, you can use this as a wall in space to sort of slow down spheres in an ISA, or maybe you can duck behind the web and protect yourself from getting shot at for a few seconds. So it definitely has its uses. Now, the strength to this console as well is the 25% bonus that it's going to give to your Tetrion damage. So between it and the Harasser probes, you essentially have 2 free tactical consoles, or 2 additional tac consoles worth of bonuses, if that makes sense. Now we're going to get into our set bonuses, and there are a few things, if I could scroll a little bit, that I did want to point out for you guys. Now we'll start with our weapon. Now I have one of the Biomol turrets here, so you can see the 2-piece bonus. Now, when we combine our hydrodynamics compensator with one of the weapons or another piece, we get a 7.5% bonus to our phaser, disruptor, plasma, and Tetrion weapon damages. Now, the reason this is significant is this is a 7.5% Category 2 bonus. Now, basically, to explain why that's significant, in a nutshell, your Category 1 bonuses are things like your tactical consoles. They buff the base damage of the weapons, whereas this, a Category 2, is truly a 7.5% bonus and will come in after the fact. So that's a pretty significant buff to get off of just a 2-piece. The next thing we have for our set bonuses is our preeminent set. Now the 2-piece is pretty straightforward. It's just a static plus 30 kinetic damage resistance rating. For the 3-piece, you're going to get a 30% bonus Tetrion damage and a 40% additional maximum shield capacity, which will indeed stack with your temporal disentanglement suite. So you're looking at a fairly significant boost to your shield capacity just off of those 2 set bonuses, or just off of that set bonus and the temporal disentanglement suite on its own. In fact, you're looking at about, looking at mine, that's about a, so you're looking at close to a 60% bonus shield capacity at the very least. Then, when we take into account our 3-piece bonus, our 2- and 3-piece bonuses from our temporal disentanglement, or our Crinum temporal manipulation. Now, the Tetrion bonus you're seeing here is actually distorted because we're on the ground. It's actually closer to a tactical console's worth of bonus. Now, this is what we get for having the temporal phase core, the temporal disentanglement suite, and the anti-chronoton Omni Beam on the ship. So again, keep in mind that 2-piece bonus is distorted because we're on the ground and I don't have all of the pieces equipped. That would actually be closer to around a 25% bonus. So you're essentially getting at least, I would say, almost another 5 consoles worth of bonus just about in terms of set bonuses. Now, the 3-piece set, again, this is slightly distorted because we're on the ground, but it's going to be a Tetrion discharge attack that you can do. It's anti-chronoton infused Tetrion discharge. It's a 2-minute recharge, and it bounces between enemies and will deal a significant amount of Tetrion damage to them. So it basically gives you additional Tetrion damage, and it gives you a free Tetrion-based attack that you can do. That's why we're using the 3-piece for that. But that's what we have for the equipment on the ship. Now, getting into our skills, it's our basic standard skill loadout we typically recommend here on Pilot Review. And you guys can kind of see our points breakdown here. Now, I'm not going to go into heavy details as to why we picked the certain skill points that we did For those people that want to know the more technical of why we picked each point that we did, we can have a link to a video for that for you on request, and you can do that. But for those people that just want to copy a build and go, this is what we have. You can see our lieutenant level skills here, lieutenant commander, commander, captain, and then finally our admiral level skills. For specializations, we went with Intel Primary, Strategist Secondary. Now, even though Strategist has a lot of tanking benefits, it also has some very nice DPS bonuses as well, and the user of the ship wanted it to lean more towards a damage dealing side, while not completely screwing himself over in the survival aspects either. As far as his traits go, now for personal space, we have the beam training for this. Then we have the beam barrage. We always like to assume that at least one crafting school has been leveled with the ship or on the character, and we've chosen beams in this instance. Then for the other traits, we have elusive for free defensive value that'll make the ship harder to hit. We have last ditch effort, which is the career specific trait for tacticals. Because he is a tactical officer, if you're interested in using the build but you're not a tactical officer, then swap in your own career specific trait for this portion, and then we'll adjust for the good day to die trait, and you're good to go. Then we have Fleet Coordinator for free damage based on how many people are in the party. 2% minimum up to a 10% maximum because it does count yourself. We have the Nanite Repair Matrix, which is a nice little hull heal whenever you drop below a certain amount of strength. Then we also have our Point Blank Shot from the House Peg mission. This is going to give a Category 2 buff to your damage, depending on how close you are to the target, up to a certain maximum amount of damage. We have Redirected Armor Plating, which is a free defensive trait you can get. It's going to grant temporary damage resistance when struck from the sides or behind. So as he's zipping in and out and doing the strafing runs that a lot of escorts do, then he's going to have some extra damage resistance to go along with the shields. Now, since he is a tactical officer, he did mention that he already had a copy of Good Day to Die. So we're using this because the user that requested it already had it. So that saves a good chunk of VC. Now, as far as our starship traits go, this is another one where we're able to utilize 4 of the 5 starship traits. We have our Best Defense, which is a free trait, and it's going to grant a hull healing effect along with the normal effects of our attack patterns. Since he already had access to the Arbiter, Battle Cruiser, and whatnot, we figured why not go ahead and slap the emergency weapon cycle on there. Whenever he activates emergency power to weapons, that's going to cut his weapon power cost in half for 20 seconds, as well as giving him a 20% firing cycle haste buff. Then, for our other 2 traits, we have our improved predictive algorithms coming from Intel, and then we have our unconventional tactics, which comes from our strategist, and activating Brace for Impact grants a damage buff for a short time, and that is a Category 2 buff that it grants. So it's an extra little something to squeak some more damage out of the ship. Now, as far as his space reputation abilities, we have the Advanced Target Systems for free critical severity. We have the Energy Refrequencer, and anytime he's throwing out damage with his energy-based attacks, he's going to heal himself for a portion of the damage dealt. And this goes along with the survival abilities of the ship to help keep him alive without completely screwing himself over. Then we have Precision for the free critical hit chance. And then finally we have the Magnified Firepower from the Gamma Reputation, which is going to be just a static Category 2 damage buff. Then for our active reputations, we have some of the ones you guys have seen quite a bit before. Our Anti-Time Entanglement Singularity, which is a nice little AoE physical damage and slow to enemies in space. Then we have our biomolecular shield generator, which poofs up a little ball in space that reduces damage he takes to his shields, and it also regens his shields a little bit while inside. Now the next thing we have is our refracting Tetrion Cascade, which is a nice little AoE Tetrion based attack that he can do. Since he's specialized into Tetrion anyway, this is actually going to get a pretty significant buff compared to what it would normally do. So this is going to hit a heck of a lot harder than what it otherwise normally would. And this could be good for maybe clearing out fighters around himself, or just a general smack-in-the-face Tetrion AoE to foes. And that's in addition to the other Tetrion-based attack he has from his 3-piece Anti-Chronoton set. Finally, we have our Quantum Singularity Manipulation. This is going to dramatically buff your science stats for a short duration, between a 100 to, I believe it's a 130, if I'm not mistaken, for a rank 2, somewhere around in there. Buff to all of your science stats, and then it's going to give a short duration cloaking style effect. Now, to get a little more bang for your buck, you can pop your Quantum Singularity Manipulation first, throw any other exotic type of buffs you may have, and drop your Anti-Time Entanglement on your foes, and you'll get a bit more bang for your buck in that aspect. Now, as far as bridge officer powers go, you have a Lieutenant Commander Universal/Intel seat on the ship, a Commander Tactical, Ensign Tactical, Lieutenant Commander Engineering, and Lieutenant Science. Now, I wanted to give him somewhat of a balanced build as far as bridge officer powers. We wanted to gear it a bit more towards damage dealing, but at the same time giving him enough survival to stay in the fight. So for our tactical seating, we have 5 powers we can call upon. We have a Tactical Team 1. It's going to redirect our shield facings and purge boarding parties automatically. We have a basic Scatter Volley 1 to still take advantage of our turret. We have a Fire at Will 3, which is going to let us smack most anything in range with our beams and do a lot more damage. And we also have our Attack Pattern Beta 3, which is going to give a fairly significant debuff to foes that get hit with it. And then for our final tactical power, we have a duplicate of our Fire at Will, which is a Fire at Will 1. Then for our Lieutenant Science seat, this is the easiest to explain. Our Science team is going to recharge our shields a bit. It's also going to purge any subnucleonic-based effects. Then we also have our Hazard Emitters, which is a nice little heal over time effect, and also purges Borg Plasma Fires, and gives a slight bit of damage resistance. Then for our final 2 seats, we have our Lieutenant Commander Engineering, which is going to have our engineering team. This is going to heal the hull a bit, as well as purge Viral Matrix style effects. We have Reverse Shield Polarity, which is going to let us recharge our shields off of incoming damage in a pinch. And then we also have our Emergency Power to Weapons 3. It's going to give a nice chunk of weapon power, as well as a Category 2 bonus to damage. Then we have our Emergency Power to Engines 1, a nice little get the heck out of dodge type of button. Then we have our Oxt Sif, which is going to give a slight bit of damage resistance and a bit of temporary HP. Then lastly, we have our Override Subsystem Safeties 3 from Intel, which is going to allow us to tap into some overcapped power. And that's what we have for the ship. Basically, since he's going to be using dual banks, he's going to be wanting to face forward most of the time. Meaning that he's going to probably want to do strafing runs or sit and park, depending on the given situation. As far as the overall cost of the ship, this is a 1-key budget, so we're assuming 4.2 million EC is the maximum spending limit. As far as the overall amount of EC investment required, you're looking at about 3.6 million total investment. That's to purchase your sticky web console and your crafted Omni. Then, as far as the lithium cost, this assumes Tier 6 reps at this point. You're looking at, or at least the discounts from Tier 6 reps have been unlocked, And you're looking at 22,500 lithium. That's to get the assimilated module, the hydrodynamics compensator, and the biomol turret. So about 3 days of total build time, and that's assuming only one tune is refining dilithium per day. Thoughts on our build, good sir?
Works.
Our wolf is progressively getting worse and worse, it seems, on that head cold. But, yep. But anyways, that's our budget build for this evening. We hope you guys liked that one. As far as bugs go, not too terribly much going on at the moment. If you guys do see any really nasty bugs or anything, do let us know. We take those reports, we pass them straight up the chain to the developers so they can get them fixed. If they don't like bugs anymore, then you or I do. But anyways, folks, that's what we've got for a show this evening. Whatnot. Not too terribly much happening this week. Everything no RP Corner this evening because our RP hologram had other obligations he needed to take care of. But hopefully he'll be back with us pretty quick. But anyways, guys, that's what we've got for a show this week. We hope you've enjoyed it and everything. And on our way out the door, shout out to our good friends over at the Temporal Armada, a very cool bunch of people. Be sure to check those guys out and their program. It's usually some pretty interesting stuff. Shout out to our other good friends over at the Kurtang Pirate Radio. The party is there. And they've always got a good style of music playing. It's usually something for everybody over there. Gotta give them credit on that. If you guys have any requests for budget builds, feel free to let us know. Tonight's build actually came about because of a request from a friend and a viewer of the show. And as you can see, we hooked him up with a build. Let us know, hey, this is the ship I've got, this is the budget level I'm working at, it's more of a bare bones type of thing, or maybe it's a little bit more than a bare bones, like a 1 key level, or even a dime budget, or it's more of a mid-range, high-end, whatever budget level, we'll work with you. Say, hey, this is what I'm wanting to look for as far as damage. I want to be a space wizard, or I want to be a tank. If you've got any special bits of equipment you want us to include in the build, we can do that too. If you think that your gear and your setup are in order, but it's your piloting that needs work, then get a brief video clip of yourself flying the mission, or some missions for us, like maybe an ISA is one prime example, and get that clip to us. We'll offer some tips and tricks on how to improve, and perhaps even run a few missions with you if need be as well, and give you some tips that way. But if you have any bugs, feel free to let us know. We do pass those up the chain, like I said earlier, and the devs don't like bugs any more than you or I do. If you have any requests for the RP Corner, feel free to let Artie know. He does take requests on that. Maybe you're just kind of curious about how to handle a certain type of RP event or a certain enemy, or maybe you're just wanting his opinion on something, and he may just talk about your topic on air. But for now, folks, this is the Pilot Review Show reminding you to have your tribbles spayed or neutered. Goodbye, everybody.